The red dust of Kafra village swirled around Kofi's bare feet as he swept the compound for the third time that morning. His stepfather, Chief Odemba, sat under the mango tree, watching him with those cold eyes that never softened, not even once in the 12 years since he married Kofi's mother. "You missed a spot," Odemba said, pointing with his walking stick. "There, by the chicken coop." Kofi bit his tongue and swept again. He was 17 now, tall and strong despite the meager portions Odemba allowed him at meals. His mother had died 3 years ago from fever, and since then, life had become a carefully orchestrated torture. "Useless boy," Odemba muttered loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "Your mother spoiled you, made you soft." The other villagers pretended not to notice. Chief Odemba owned half the farmland in Kafra and had the ear of the regional governor. No one dared defend the orphan stepson who slept in the storage shed and ate leftovers like a dog. That evening, as Kofi prepared ugali in the outdoor kitchen, he overheard voices from inside the main house. Odemba was entertaining guests, village elders, and a man Kofi didn't recognize. The stranger wore a military uniform with bright medals that caught the firelight. "The recruitment drive is mandatory," the officer was saying. "Every village must provide 5 young men for the border conflict. The rebellion in the eastern provinces needs to be crushed." Kofi's heart quickened. The Eastern War was a death sentence. Everyone knew that. For 2 years, boys had been sent and few returned. Those who did came back missing limbs, their eyes hollow and haunted. "I have no sons of military age," Odemba said smoothly. "My own children are too young, only 7 and 9 years old." Kofi frowned. That was true. Odemba's sons from his first wife were indeed children, spoiled and cruel like their father. "What about the boy outside?" the officer asked. "I saw him when I arrived. Strong build. Looks capable." There was a pause. Kofi's hands froze over the cooking pot. You mean Kofi?" Odemba said, and Kofi could hear the smile in his voice. "My late wife's son from her first marriage. Yes, he is of age. 17, I believe." "Perfect. His name goes on the list." Of course. The boy would be honored to serve the nation." Kofi's blood ran cold. He abandoned the ugali and pressed himself against the mud wall, listening. "Between us," Odemba continued, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "the boy is trouble. Lazy, disrespectful. Perhaps the military will make a man of him." Or. The sentence hung unfinished, but the meaning was clear. The officer chuckled darkly. Kofi didn't sleep that night. He lay on his thin mat in the storage shed, staring at the wooden ceiling. His stepfather had finally found the perfect way to be rid of him. Legal, even patriotic. No one would question it. 3 days later, a military truck arrived. 5 young men from Kafra stood in the village square with small cloth bags containing their only possessions. Kofi was among them. The other boys' families wept and embraced them. Mothers pressed food into their hands. Fathers gave stern advice about courage and honor. Odemba did not come to say goodbye. Only his young half-brother, little Ade, sneaked out to press something into Kofi's palm. It was their mother's silver bracelet, the only thing of value she'd owned. "Mama said you should have it," Ade whispered, tears streaming down his face. "She told me before she died. She said you were special, Kofi. She said you were born for something great." Kofi hugged the boy, then climbed into the truck. As it pulled away, he caught a glimpse of Odemba watching from his window, a satisfied smile on his face. The truck drove for 2 days, collecting boys from villages across the region. They arrived at Camp Mamba, a sprawling military base surrounded by barbed wire and guard towers. The place smelled of sweat, diesel, and fear. A sergeant with a scar running down his cheek lined them up in the burning sun. "Listen well," he barked. "Half of you will die in training. Half of those who survive training will die in your first battle. If you're smart, you'll learn fast. If you're weak, you'll be buried in unmarked graves. We don't have time for cowards." That night, lying on a hard bunk in a crowded barracks, Kofi made a decision. He would not die. He would not give Odemba that satisfaction. He would survive no matter what it took. And someday, somehow, he would return to Kafra village. Not as the unwanted stepson, but as someone his stepfather would be forced to respect. The training was hell designed by demons. They woke at 4 in the morning and ran 20 kilometers with heavy packs. They crawled through mud under barbed wire while instructors fired live ammunition over their heads. They learned to assemble rifles blindfolded, to move silently through jungle terrain, to kill with their bare hands. Boys dropped like flies. Some died from heat stroke, others from accidents during live-fire exercises. A few simply gave up, their spirits broken, and were sent home in disgrace or assigned to cooking duties. But Kofi didn't break. He discovered something during those brutal months. Something his stepfather's cruelty had unknowingly prepared him for. Years of abuse had built a core of steel inside him. Where other recruits crumbled under the sergeant's insults and impossible demands, Kofi simply endured. Pain was nothing new. Humiliation was familiar. And unlike the other boys who'd come from loving homes, Kofi had nothing to lose. Lieutenant Okoro noticed him during the 3rd month of training. Okoro was a legend in the military, a tactical genius who'd risen from poverty to become one of the youngest officers in the nation's history. "You, recruit," Okoro called out during a combat exercise. "What's your name?" "Kofi Mensah, sir." "You're quick. I've been watching you. You anticipate your opponent's moves. Where'd you learn to fight?" Kofi hesitated. "Survival, sir. I had to learn young." Okoro studied him with intelligent eyes. "Report to my office after drills." That evening, Kofi stood at attention in Okoro's sparse office. "At ease, soldier." Okoro leaned back in his chair. "I'm putting together a special unit. We need men who can think, not just follow orders. Men who want something badly enough to push beyond normal limits. You interested?" "Yes, sir."
Why?
"Most recruits just want to survive and go home." "What's driving you?" Kofi met his gaze. "I made a promise, sir. To myself. I won't go back until I'm someone who can't be pushed around anymore." Okoro smiled grimly. "Good. Anger is useful if you channel it right. Welcome to Ghost Unit." Ghost Unit was different. They trained in counterinsurgency, intelligence gathering, and guerrilla warfare. While regular soldiers marched in formation, Ghost Unit learned to move like shadows through hostile territory. They studied maps and enemy psychology. They became experts in turning disadvantage into victory. Kofi excelled. When they deployed to the Eastern Front 6 months later, Kofi was ready. The rebellion was worse than anyone had admitted. Whole towns had fallen to insurgent control. Supply lines were cut. Government forces were trapped in isolated outposts, starving and surrounded. Ghost Unit's first mission was to break through enemy lines and extract a platoon of trapped soldiers from Fort Kasai. It should have been suicide. Instead, under Kofi's strategy, suggested during a planning session, they infiltrated disguised as rebels, created chaos with coordinated explosions, and led the trapped soldiers out through a forgotten mining tunnel Kofi had spotted on old colonial maps. They saved 73 men and lost only 2 of their own. After that, Kofi's reputation grew. He had an uncanny ability to read terrain and predict enemy movements. He was fearless but not reckless. His men trusted him because he never asked them to take risks he wouldn't take himself. Within a year, he was promoted to sergeant, then lieutenant, then captain. 5 years passed like a fever dream of gunfire and strategy sessions, of victories and losses, of learning to lead men who depended on him for their lives. The war finally turned when Kofi, now a major, orchestrated the Battle of Broken Bridge. Using a combination of deception and precise timing, he led a force of 300 soldiers to defeat an insurgent army of over 2,000, capturing their leader and breaking the rebellion's command structure. The eastern provinces fell back under government control within months. Kofi was 24 years old and being called a hero. Lieutenant General Afolabi, the nation's highest-ranking officer, summoned him to the capital. "Major Mensah," the old general said, walking slowly around Kofi as he stood at attention. "I've read every report about your service. Remarkable. You have a gift for warfare that cannot be taught. Thank you, sir. I'm promoting you to colonel and putting you in command of the Northern Defense Initiative. But that's just the beginning. Afolabi stopped in front of him. I'm grooming you for my position. When I retire in 3 years, I want you to become the nation's lieutenant general, the youngest in our history. Kofi's heart pounded. Sir, I'm honored. Don't thank me yet. The road ahead is brutal. Politics, bureaucracy, enemies within our own ranks. But I believe you can handle it. Afolabi extended his hand. Make me proud, Colonel. That night, alone in his quarters, Kofi held his mother's silver bracelet. He'd carried it through every battle, every deployment, sewn into a hidden pocket over his heart. I'm coming home soon, Mama, he whispered. Just like you said, I was born for something great. He thought of Odemba, probably sitting under that same mango tree, believing himself safe and powerful in Kafra village. He had no idea what was coming. 8 years had passed since the military truck had driven Kofi away from Kafra village. Now, a convoy of 3 black military vehicles rolled down the same dusty road, flags bearing the national emblems snapping in the wind. In the lead vehicle sat Lieutenant General Kofi Mensah, the nation's highest-ranking military officer, wearing uniform decorated with medals and a single gold star on each shoulder. He was 25 years old. News of his visit had spread through Kafra like wildfire. The government was building a new regional military academy, and General Mensah himself was touring potential sites. Kafra, with its proximity to the capital and available land, was on the shortlist. The village had transformed overnight. Women swept streets that hadn't been cleaned in years. Men repainted fences. Children practiced songs of welcome. Everyone wanted to impress the young general who might bring prestige and jobs to their forgotten corner of the country. Chief Odemba stood at the center of the village square, wearing his finest igbada, sweating despite the morning coolness. Around him clustered the village elders, all nervous and excited. Remember, Odemba told them, I will do the speaking. We must make a good impression. This general could change everything for Kafra. None of them knew. The young officers who'd arrived yesterday to prepare for the general's visit had never mentioned his name. Military protocol. The general's identity would be revealed only upon arrival. The convoy stopped. Soldiers emerged first, crisp and professional, forming a protective perimeter. Then the rear door of the center vehicle opened. A tall officer stepped out, his uniform immaculate, his bearing regal. He removed his sunglasses, and Odemba's world tilted sideways. It couldn't be. Kofi. The name escaped Odemba's lips as a strangled whisper. The general's eyes locked onto him. There was no warmth there, only cold recognition. Chief Odemba, Kofi said, his voice deep and authoritative. How good to see you again. The village elders looked confused, glancing between the general and their chief. Slowly, understanding began to dawn on a few faces. The older women, who remembered the sad boy who'd swept compounds and slept in sheds, covered their mouths in shock. You're alive, Odemba stammered. You survived. More than survived. Kofi walked forward slowly, deliberately, letting his stepfather see every medal, every mark of achievement. I excelled. The Eastern War made me. Every battle, every hardship, forged me into exactly what the nation needed. Odemba's face had gone gray. His hands trembled. General Mensah, one of the elders, spoke up, not reading the room. Chief Odemba has prepared a wonderful proposal for the academy site. Perhaps. I know what Chief Odemba has prepared. Kofi interrupted, his eyes never leaving his stepfather. I've read the proposal. Very thorough. It offers land for the academy. Land that, according to my intelligence officers, was seized from small farmers who couldn't pay debts to the chief. Land that includes the plot where my mother is buried. The silence was absolute. That's not. Odemba started. Don't lie to me. Kofi's voice cut like a blade. I am the highest military authority in this nation. I have resources you can't imagine. I know everything about what you've done since I left. The corruption, the land grabbing, the way you've squeezed this village dry while growing fat and rich. Odemba fell to his knees. Kofi, please. I made mistakes. I was hard on you, yes, but I didn't know. Didn't know what? That I would survive? That I would return? Kofi's voice rose. You sent me to die, Odemba. Don't insult both of us by pretending otherwise. You put my name on that recruitment list hoping the war would solve your problem. That you'd never have to see your wife's son again. Tears streamed down Odemba's face. The mighty chief, reduced to begging in the dust. I could destroy you, Kofi said quietly. One word from me, and you'd face investigation for every corrupt deal you've made. You'd lose everything. Your position, your wealth, your freedom. Please, Odemba sobbed. Please, I beg you. Kofi stared down at the broken man who'd made his childhood a living nightmare. He thought of his mother, who'd loved this man enough to marry him. He thought of little Ade, now a teenager, who'd shown him kindness when no one else would. And he thought of all the nights in the war, when anger had kept him alive, when the promise of this moment had pushed him through exhaustion and fear. Now that he was here, now that he had all the power, the revenge tasted like ash in his mouth. Stand up, Kofi said finally. Odemba struggled to his feet, face streaked with tears and dust. I'm not going to destroy you, Odemba. Not because you deserve mercy, but because my mother wouldn't want it. And because I refuse to let bitterness poison what I've become. Kofi stepped closer. But understand this. The academy will be built, and you will donate that land freely. You will return the seized properties to their original owners. And you will resign as chief, effective immediately. But those are my terms. Accept them, and you can live out your days in peace. Refuse, and I will bury you in legal proceedings that will expose every dirty secret you have. Odemba nodded frantically. Yes. Yes, I accept. Anything. Kofi turned to the village elders. I want witnesses. Draw up the documents today. I'll review them before I leave tomorrow. Then he walked past his stepfather without another glance, toward the old storage shed where he'd once slept. It was still there, weathered and sad. A teenage boy stood nearby, watching with wide eyes. Ade, Kofi said, and his voice softened. You've grown. Ade ran to him, and they embraced. I knew you'd come back, Ade whispered. I always knew. That evening, Kofi sat alone in the house that had been prepared for his stay, the chief's former residence that Odemba had vacated within hours. Through the window, he could see the lights of Kafra, hear the sounds of the village settling into night. His officers had wanted to celebrate. The village wanted to throw a feast in his honor. But Kofi had declined both. He needed silence to process what he was feeling. The door opened quietly. Ade entered, carrying a tray with tea and food. You don't have to serve me, Kofi said. I know. I want to. Ade set the tray down and sat across from him. At 15, he looked remarkably like their mother. Can I ask you something? Anything. Why didn't you punish him more? Father, I mean Odemba, he deserves worse than just losing his position. Kofi sipped the tea, buying time to form his thoughts. I spent 8 years imagining this moment. In my fantasies, I humiliated him completely. Made him suffer like he made me suffer. He set down the cup. But when I finally had the power to do it, I realized something. Revenge doesn't heal wounds. It just opens new ones. But justice. Justice and revenge aren't the same thing, Ade. Justice is about making things right. Revenge is about making yourself feel better through someone else's pain. Kofi leaned forward. I took away his power to hurt others. That's justice. Anything more would have been for my ego, not for the village. Ade considered this. The elders are calling you wise beyond your years. Kofi laughed bitterly. Wise? I'm 25 and I've killed more men than I can count. I've made decisions that sent soldiers to their deaths. I've seen things that wake me up screaming at night. That's not wisdom, Ade. That's just survival with consequences. Do you regret it? Becoming a soldier? Every single day. Kofi's voice was raw. And I'd do it all again because it made me who I am. That's the terrible truth about hardship. It destroys you and builds you at the same time. They sat in silence for a while. What will you do now? Ade asked. I return to the capital tomorrow. There are threats at the northern border, political tensions with neighboring countries, 1,000 problems that need solutions. Kofi smiled sadly. And you? What do you want to do with your life? I want to be like you. No, you don't. Be better than me. I'll make sure you get education, opportunities one never had. You can choose your path, not have it forced on you. Will you come back? To visit. Kofi looked out at Kafra village, at the place that had been both prison and home. Yes. The academy will be built here. I'll oversee the project personally. This village gave me pain, but it also gave me your mother. Her memory deserves better than abandonment. Later that night, Kofi walked to his mother's grave. Someone had been maintaining it. Fresh flowers lay on the simple stone marker. I did it, Mama, he whispered. I became someone great, just like you said. But it cost me everything soft inside me. I hope that was the right trade. The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment, Kofi could almost hear her voice, feel her gentle hand on his head like when he was small. The next morning, as his convoy prepared to leave, the entire village gathered to say goodbye. Odemba stood at the back, diminished and quiet. Their eyes met briefly. Kofi saw no hatred there anymore, only a broken old man facing the consequences of his cruelty. Kofi felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not anger. Just emptiness where the fire had burned for so long. As the convoy pulled away, Kofi looked back one last time. Ade stood waving, tears streaming down his face. Kofi raised his hand in farewell. The dust cloud behind the vehicle swallowed Kafra village from view. Colonel Amara, his second in command, sat beside him. Permission to speak freely, sir? Granted. That took remarkable restraint. Most men with your power and your history would have crushed him. Most men with my power and history are consumed by bitterness, Kofi replied. I've seen what that does to leaders. It rots them from inside, turns them into tyrants. So what now, sir? Kofi pulled out his mother's silver bracelet, turned it over in his hands. Now we build something better. The academy in Kafra will train a new generation of officers. Not just warriors, but leaders who understand that strength without wisdom is just violence with a uniform. You're thinking long-term. I have to. The general who sent me to war is retiring next year. The president wants me to replace him completely, make me supreme commander of all armed forces at 26. Kofi closed his fist around the bracelet. I'll have power beyond anything my stepfather could imagine. The question is, what will I do with it? Sir, will I use it to help people like the boy I was? Or will I become another Odemba, using my position to settle scores and feed my ego? Kofi looked at his reflection in the vehicle's window. He barely recognized the decorated general staring back. That's the real battle, Amara. Not the one against external enemies, but the one inside ourselves. The convoy drove on toward the capital, toward a future bright with possibility and dark with responsibility. Behind them in Kafra village, change had already begun. The land would be returned. The academy would rise. And in the storage shed where an unwanted boy once slept, Ade would paint a mural of his brother in uniform, a reminder that even from cruelty and rejection, greatness could emerge. But at what cost? That was the question Kofi would carry with him for the rest of his life. The stepson they sent to war had returned as the nation's highest general. He'd won everything, and lost something he could never name.